were there. You were conscious. You were experiencing things, you felt hunger and warmth and the specific weight of being held by someone who loved you. You heard voices, the same voices every day that became the most familiar sounds in your world. You saw faces, you learned them. You responded to them. You had preferences, you had fears, you had moments of something that can only be described as joy. And you remember none of it. Not your first steps, the actual moment your body discovered it could cross a room without falling. Not your first word, the sound that came out of your mouth that made the people around you react in a way you didn't yet understand. Not the room you slept in for the first years of your life, the ceiling you stared at every morning, the face that appeared above you, and which for a long time was your entire understanding of what another person was. Gone, completely, as if it never happened. As if someone reached into the archive of your life and removed the first chapter entirely. Your earliest memory, if you try to locate it right now, is probably from age 3, maybe 4, possibly 5. A fragment, a birthday party where you can almost see the cake but not the faces around it. A car journey where you remember the quality of the light but not the destination. A specific afternoon in a room you no longer live in, for reasons you can't explain. Before that, nothing. A gap where several years of your conscious life should be. And here's the thing nobody tells you about that gap. It isn't an accident. It isn't a limitation. It isn't a flaw in the way your brain stores information. It is a deliberate design decision, one of the most sophisticated things evolution has ever built. And the reason it exists changes how you think about memory, identity, and what it actually means to become a person. Before we get to why, let's establish how strange this actually is. You were not unconscious during those years. Infants are aware. They feel pain, pleasure, fear, and comfort. They form preferences. They recognize faces within hours of birth and distinguish their mother's voice from a stranger's within days. They learn. They respond. They are, by any meaningful definition of the word, experiencing their lives. And yet the memories don't form, or if they form, they don't survive. By the time you were old enough to have a conversation about what you experienced, the experiences were already gone. Psychologists have a name for this, infantile amnesia. And for a long time, the explanation seemed obvious. Babies' brains are underdeveloped, the memory systems aren't mature enough, the hippocampus hasn't finished forming. This is partially true, but it's the least interesting part of the answer. Because the more scientists studied infantile amnesia, the more they realized something strange. The forgetting doesn't stop when the hippocampus matures, it continues. Children remember things from age 2 or 3, and then forget them. Studies that follow children over time show that memories which existed at age 3 are often gone by age 7. The brain isn't just failing to form memories in infancy, it's actively erasing them. And active erasure is not a malfunction. Active erasure is a choice. Here's what's actually happening. In the first years of life, your brain is undergoing a process that has no equivalent at any other point in human existence. New neurons are being generated at rates that will never occur again. Neural pathways are forming, dissolving, and reforming. The entire architecture of the brain, how it processes language, emotion, social information, spatial reasoning, is being constructed from scratch. This process is called synaptic pruning, and it is catastrophically destructive to existing memories. Think of it this way. Memory is stored in the connections between neurons, in specific patterns of neural activation that the brain can recreate when it needs to recall something. Synaptic pruning systematically dismantles and rebuilds those connections. It's a renovation of the entire building while you're still living in it. Any memories stored in the old architecture don't survive the renovation. Not because they were unimportant, because the architecture that held them no longer exists. But here's what that renovation produces. A brain capable of language. The ability to acquire language, to map sounds onto meanings, to understand grammar, to generate sentences you've never heard before, requires a level of neuroplasticity that is only possible when the brain is being rebuilt from the ground up. The same process that erases your earliest memories is the process that makes language acquisition possible. You paid for language with your past, and evolution decided that was an excellent trade. There's a second layer to this that changes the story completely. In 2014, a research team at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto discovered something that had been missed in decades of memory research. They were studying neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, in the hippocampus, the brain region most critical for memory formation. What they found was that high rates of neurogenesis don't just support memory formation, they actively interfere with it. New neurons, integrating into existing memory circuits, disrupt the patterns that stored previous memories. The very process that gives the developing brain its extraordinary capacity for growth, the generation of new neural cells, is simultaneously destroying the records of what came before. The implication is striking. Infantile amnesia isn't a side effect of an immature brain. It's a side effect of an extraordinarily active one. The brain isn't forgetting because it can't remember. It's forgetting because it's too busy becoming. But why? Why would evolution build a system that deliberately sacrifices memory for growth? The answer is one of the most elegant solutions in the history of the human brain. Your memories are not neutral records, they are filters. Every experience you remember shapes how you interpret the next experience. Every pattern you've stored influences which patterns you notice, which you ignore, which you expect. Memory in this sense is both a tool and a constraint. It helps you navigate a world you already understand, and it makes it harder to learn a world that works differently. A brain that enters childhood already loaded with memories, already pattern-matched to its earliest experiences, is a brain that will struggle to learn. Language requires the brain to build an entirely new system of pattern recognition from scratch, with no interference from existing systems. Social understanding requires the brain to decode entirely new rules of interaction. Cultural learning requires absorbing the specific logic of the world you were born into, not the general instincts of the species. To do all of this, to become a human being capable of operating in a specific cultural and linguistic context, the brain needs a clean slate. The amnesia is the clean slate. Evolution didn't forget to give you memories of your earliest years. It took them away so that you could become someone who could hold memories at all. There is one more thing worth knowing about this. The memories didn't entirely disappear. What infantile amnesia erases is explicit memory, the kind you can consciously access and narrate. The kind that lets you say, "I remember when." What it doesn't erase is implicit memory, the kind stored in your body, your emotional responses, your instincts. The people who held you most in your first years still shaped you, not as stories you can tell, but as patterns you can't explain. The feeling of safety, or its absence. The baseline expectation of how other people behave, the emotional tone that underlies everything else. You don't remember being loved in those years, but if you were loved in those years, some part of you has always known it. Not as a memory you can locate, as a certainty you can't explain. A wordless knowledge that predates every word you know. The first years of your life are still in you. They're just stored somewhere language can't reach. So the next time you try to remember, the next time you reach back before age 3 or 4 and find nothing there, just a smooth blankness where years of your life should be. Remember this, that blankness is not a loss. It is the evidence of the most extraordinary thing your brain ever did. It rebuilt itself, completely, from the inside, while you were still living in it, and emerged capable of language, of culture, of the kind of memory that lets you be a self at all. You don't remember being a baby because your brain was too busy building the person who would do the remembering. And everything that mattered from those years, every face, every voice, every moment of being held by someone who loved you, is still there, just not in a place you can visit with words. That's what this channel is. Every week, one thing about being human that seems like a flaw, a gap, a failure, explained by the hundreds of thousands of years that made it exactly right,